The clicking sound is what I'll remember. That empty, mechanical snap when Jorik pulled the trigger on his lasgun and nothing happened. Not the familiar whine and crack of lasfire, not even the sputtering discharge you get from a depleted power pack trying to squeeze out one more shot. Just click, metal on metal, the sound of a weapon becoming an expensive club. He looked at the lasgun like it had personally betrayed him, checked the power pack connection, cycled the firing mechanism, pulled the trigger again. Click, click, click. Out, he said, his voice flat with the particular disbelief of someone whose primary survival tool has just become useless weight. I was Corporal Thane Valdis then, fire team leader, 3rd Squad, 2nd Platoon, Maccabian Janissaries, attached to a PDF regiment whose designation I'd stopped bothering to remember after the 3rd time they'd been reorganized. We were holding a supply depot on the outskirts of a city that had changed hands 4 times in the past week. Imperial to enemy, and back to Imperial again, each transition marked by casualties we couldn't replace and resources we couldn't resupply. The depot itself was already stripped when we'd arrived. Someone before us, maybe retreating PDF, maybe opportunistic civilians, maybe deserters from our own side, had taken everything of value. All that remained were empty crates, broken furniture, and the concrete walls we were now defending against an enemy advance that showed no signs of stopping. My squad numbered 7 when we'd taken position. Myself, Jorik as 2nd, Massacre with the Vox equipment, Harlan and Chen as standard riflemen, and Torvald and Beck as our heavy weapons team with a stubber that had jammed 3 hours ago and couldn't be cleared without tools we didn't have. 7 guardsmen, 1 broken heavy stubber, 6 lasguns, and ammunition that had been running low since yesterday. I'd been rationing fire for hours, controlled bursts only, aimed shots at confirmed targets, no suppressive fire, no speculative shooting, no wasted charges on anything that wasn't an immediate threat. The enemy had been probing our position all morning, small groups testing our defenses, trying to identify weak points, drawing our fire to assess our strength. I'd recognized the pattern, had seen it on Cronus Prime when enemy commanders were gauging our capabilities before committing to full assault. They were measuring us, counting our shots, calculating how much ammunition we had left. And now Jorik's lasgun was empty. Anyone else? I asked, keeping my voice level, maintaining the command authority that prevented panic from spreading through the squad. Harlan checked his power pack indicator. Maybe 15 shots. 20, if I'm lucky, and the indicator's pessimistic. Chen didn't bother checking. Empty 10 minutes ago. Been dry firing to make them think I'm still armed. Massacre pulled her power pack and examined it physically. Enough for maybe 1 burst. Probably less. I checked my own. The indicator showed critical depletion, maybe a dozen shots remaining, possibly fewer depending on how degraded the pack's charge retention had become. Standard Guard issue power packs were supposed to maintain effectiveness through 500 shots minimum. But these packs had been through multiple campaigns, multiple recharges, multiple years of service that degraded their efficiency well below manufacturer specifications. Torvald and Beck, having given up on the jammed stubber, had been using their sidearms las pistols with smaller power packs that depleted even faster than rifle capacity. Both were already empty, the pistols holstered and useless. So, 7 guardsmen, maybe 50 shots total across 4 weapons, facing an enemy force that numbered in the hundreds, potentially thousands depending on how much strength they could commit to overrunning this position. The mathematics were simple. We couldn't win, couldn't hold, couldn't even delay them significantly once they realized we were effectively disarmed. Harlan voiced what we were all thinking. Orders, Corporal. Standard Imperial Guard doctrine provided clear instructions for ammunition depletion scenarios. Consolidate remaining munitions to the soldiers most capable of using them effectively. Establish fallback positions to delay enemy advance through terrain rather than firepower. Request immediate resupply through command channels. And if resupply proved impossible, withdraw to friendly lines while maintaining unit cohesion and tactical effectiveness. But our Vox had been damaged during yesterday's fighting. Mazika could receive transmissions intermittently, but couldn't send, meaning we could hear command issuing orders to units that still existed, but couldn't report our status or request support. Our fallback route had been cut off when enemy forces occupied the intersections between our position and friendly lines. Consolidating ammunition would give maybe 2 people enough shots to fight effectively, while the rest became liabilities. And withdrawal wasn't an option when surrounded. So doctrine provided no useful guidance. We were alone, undersupplied, cut off, and effectively disarmed. "We hold position," I said, making the decision that killed some of us and damned the rest. "Conserve remaining ammunition for confirmed threats only. No firing unless targets close to within 50 meters. We make them think we're still combat effective as long as possible." Jorik stared at me. "Corporal, they'll figure it out. Soon as they probe again and we don't return fire, they'll know we're dry. Then they rush us, and we die." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But if we start shooting now, we're definitely out of ammunition in the next engagement. This way we have a chance of resupply arriving before they commit to assault." It was a lie. We all knew it was a lie. Resupply wasn't coming. Command had bigger problems than one isolated squad in an already lost sector. We'd been written off hours ago, our position marked as contested territory, our survival irrelevant to whatever strategic objectives Command was pursuing. But lies help. Lies maintain morale when truth offers nothing but despair. Lies give soldiers something to hope for, even when hope has no foundation in reality. The squad accepted the lie because accepting it was easier than confronting the alternative. We waited. The depot had been designed for vehicle storage, a large open space with high ceilings, reinforced walls, and wide doors that couldn't be properly sealed. We'd barricaded the main entrance with the empty crates and furniture, creating obstacles that would slow but not stop a determined assault. The walls had firing positions, gaps where we could observe and shoot without exposing ourselves completely. The layout gave us decent defensive advantages, assuming we had ammunition to exploit those advantages. Without ammunition, the layout became a trap. One entrance we couldn't properly seal. Walls that confined us rather than protected us. Firing positions that would only reveal our locations once the enemy realized we weren't shooting back. I positioned the squad to maximize the illusion of combat effectiveness. Jorik and Chen both completely out of ammunition at positions with the best sightlines, maintaining observation and calling out enemy movements as though they were ready to engage. Harlan and Masika both nearly empty at secondary positions where they could cover the main entrance. Torvald and Beck, armed only with combat knives, now deeper in the depot where they could respond to breaches we couldn't prevent. And myself at the central position, maintaining command authority, preserving the remaining ammunition for the moment when firing became absolutely necessary. The enemy probed again an hour later. A small group, maybe 6 soldiers, possibly scouts, testing our response. They approached the barricaded entrance cautiously, using cover, moving with the tactical competence that suggested proper military training rather than just armed mob. Jorik tracked them through his sights, called out distances: 100 meters, 80, 60, 50. 50 meters was my designated engagement range, the point where I'd ordered the squad to open fire, the distance where our remaining ammunition had the best chance of achieving kills, rather than just forcing them to take cover. "Weapons ready," I commanded, loud enough for my voice to carry through the depot, creating the impression of a full squad preparing coordinated fire. The enemy scouts hesitated, took cover. Clearly expected us to start shooting. We didn't. I held fire, gambling that they'd interpret our silence as discipline rather than depletion, that they'd assume we were conserving ammunition for optimal targets rather than desperately preserving our last few shots. The gamble paid off. After 30 seconds of standoff, the scouts in cover, us maintaining firing positions, they withdrew, pulled back beyond our sightlines, presumably to report that we remained combat effective, that assaulting our position would cost them casualties. Jorik exhaled slowly. They're going to probe again. Closer next time. Testing our firing discipline. I know, I said. And when they get close enough to see we're not shooting, then we shoot. Use what we have left. Make it count. Masika was monitoring the Vox, listening to transmissions from units across the city. Her expression told me the news wasn't good before she spoke. Corporal, command just ordered general withdrawal from this sector. All units to fall back to the eastern perimeter. Immediate evacuation. No holdouts. Can you transmit? Acknowledge and request extraction? She shook her head. Still receive only. Transmission systems are completely burned out. So command had ordered withdrawal but couldn't know we hadn't received the order. Would assume we'd evacuated with everyone else. Would mark this sector as abandoned, available for enemy occupation without contest. We were officially forgotten. Left behind not through malice but through the simple chaos of battlefield communications failure. No one knew we were still here. No one was coming to extract us. No one would remember we'd held this position until our ammunition ran dry and beyond. How long until enemy occupation? I asked. Masika listened to the tactical chatter, piecing together information from fragmentary reports. Maybe 2 hours. They're advancing across the sector as our forces pull back, meeting minimal resistance, consolidating territory. 2 hours until this depot was deep behind enemy lines, until holding position became not just futile but suicidal, until we'd be completely cut off from any possibility of linking up with friendly forces. Harlan voiced the question. Do we withdraw anyway? Try to reach the eastern perimeter before enemy occupation is complete. I considered it, visualized the route we'd have to take. Through streets we knew were occupied. Past intersections where enemy forces were consolidating, across terrain where 7 guardsmen, only 4 of them armed, and those 4 with minimal ammunition would be spotted, engaged, and eliminated within minutes. We'd never make it, I said. Best case, we get halfway before we're detected and killed. Worst case, we run into enemy forces immediately and die without achieving anything. So we stay here and die when they overrun us. We stay here and try to survive until circumstances change. Another lie. Circumstances wouldn't change. The sector was lost. Command had withdrawn. The enemy was consolidating territory. Our survival depended on variables beyond our control, resupply that wasn't coming, reinforcement that didn't exist, intervention that command had no reason to provide. But I couldn't say that. Couldn't tell the squad that we were staying because withdrawal meant certain death, while staying meant probable death, and probable was marginally better than certain even when the margin was razor thin. The next probe came 90 minutes later. Larger group this time, maybe 15 soldiers, moving with coordinated precision that suggested they were testing our strength in preparation for actual assault. They advanced to within 60 meters before I gave the order to fire. Harlan and Masika opened up simultaneously, controlled bursts that dropped 3 of the enemy soldiers and forced the rest into cover. I fired twice, carefully aimed shots that hit 1 soldier and forced another to abandon his position. The engagement lasted maybe 10 seconds, long enough to convince the enemy we remained armed and dangerous, brief enough to conserve our remaining ammunition. The enemy withdrew again, dragging their casualties. We'd killed 4, wounded at least 2 more. A successful defensive engagement by any tactical measure, except it had cost us maybe 20 shots. Harlan was completely empty now. Masika had maybe 1 burst remaining. I had perhaps 8 shots left. Total ammunition for the entire squad. Approximately 10 rounds across 2 weapons. Next probe, we're dry, Jorik observed. They'll figure it out when we can't return fire. I know, I said. What do we do when they rush us? I looked at the combat knives we all carried, at the broken stubber that might function as improvised club, at the empty las guns that could serve as bludgeons if we got desperate enough. We fight hand to hand, hold them in the choke points, use the terrain to offset their numerical advantage. Chen laughed a short, bitter sound. Corporal, They outnumber us probably 50-1. Terrain doesn't offset that kind of disparity. No, I agreed. But it lets us kill more of them before they kill us. Makes our deaths expensive rather than free. Forces them to commit resources to overrunning this position instead of deploying those resources elsewhere. It was the only justification I could offer. We couldn't win, couldn't survive, could only make our deaths tactically inconvenient for the enemy, force them to expend time and casualties, eliminating us, create minor disruption in their consolidation of the sector. It wasn't much, but it was all we had. The squad accepted this with the resignation of soldiers who'd known their survival was temporary since the moment they'd enlisted. Guard service meant dying on forgotten worlds for objectives you didn't understand. The only variables were when and how, whether you died quickly from a sniper round you never saw, or slowly from infected wounds in a Medicaid tent, or messily in close combat when your ammunition ran out and all you had left were blades and desperation. We'd reached the third option. An hour passed. Then two. The expected assault didn't materialize. Either the enemy was consolidating forces for overwhelming attack, or they'd decided our position wasn't worth the casualties we demonstrated we could inflict. Massacre kept monitoring the Vox. The transmissions painted a picture of comprehensive Imperial defeat across this entire region. Units falling back in disorder. Defensive lines collapsing. Enemy advances meeting minimal resistance as our forces evacuated toward more defensible terrain. We were an anomaly. One squad still holding ground that command had already ceded, still maintaining defensive posture in sector that was officially abandoned. Technically, we were following orders hold position until relieved or ordered to withdraw. The fact that we couldn't receive withdrawal orders was irrelevant to doctrine. In the absence of contrary instruction, we maintained current objective, which meant we'd hold this depot until the enemy killed us or circumstances forced different action. Torvald brought up the question we'd all been considering. Corporal, what about surrender? The word hung in the depot's stale air like toxic gas. Explain, I said, keeping my voice neutral. We're out of ammunition, cut off from friendly forces, holding indefensible position against overwhelming enemy strength. Imperial Guard doctrine permits surrender when continued resistance serves no tactical purpose and casualties can be prevented through capitulation. He was right, technically. Guard regulations did include provisions for surrender under specific circumstances when position was untenable, reinforcement impossible, casualties preventable, and tactical benefit of continued resistance negligible. We met every criterion. But doctrine also specified that surrender required command authorization. That individual units couldn't simply decide to stop fighting. That capitulation was permitted only when ordered by competent authority, and we had no way to contact command to request permission. Who are we surrendering to? I asked. What enemy force? What guarantee do we have they'll accept surrender rather than just executing us? Torvald hesitated. We could send someone out, under flag of truce, negotiate terms. With what flag? What truce markers? How do we communicate surrender to an enemy force that probably doesn't share our language or honor our conventions? I was raising obstacles because I didn't want to address the fundamental question, whether surrendering was cowardice or practical survival, whether dying in futile resistance served the Emperor better than living as prisoner. Whether my duty as squad leader was to preserve my soldiers' lives or spend them according to Imperial doctrine. The Maccabean Janissaries came from a penitent world, a planet where the population atoned for ancient sins through service to the Imperium. We were raised believing that death in Emperor's service was redemption, that survival without honor was damnation, that surrender was spiritual failure regardless of tactical justification. But I'd also been trained that squad leaders preserve their soldiers when possible, that wasting lives served no purpose, that needless sacrifice was tactical incompetence rather than faithful service. The contradictions paralyzed me. Beck settled the question in the way soldiers often do by making circumstances remove the option. Corporal, he called from his observation position. Enemy forces approaching. Large formation. At least 50 soldiers. moving with assault deployment pattern. The assault we'd been expecting had arrived. I moved to firing position, checking my lasgun's power pack one final time. 8 shots confirmed. Maybe 9 if the indicator was pessimistic. Masika had maybe 5. Everyone else was dry. Positions? I ordered. Armed personnel at firing points. Everyone else prepare for close defense. We hold the entrance as long as ammunition permits, then fall back to hand. The squad moved with practiced efficiency, taking positions we'd maintained for hours, readying weapons that ranged from marginally functional to completely useless. The enemy advance was professional. They'd learned from previous probes, approached with proper cover and coordination, didn't bunch up into easy targets, disciplined military formation rather than mob assault. I tracked them through my sights, counting soldiers, identifying equipment, assessing their capabilities. They had proper armor, full ammunition, support weapons, everything we lacked. The disparity was so complete it would have been laughable if it wasn't about to kill us. They reached 50 meters, 40, 30. I fired. Masika fired. Our combined fire dropped 3 soldiers good shooting considering the stress and limited ammunition. The enemy force took cover, returned fire, maintained pressure. I fired again. 4 rounds remaining. Masika's weapon clicked empty. She was dry. I fired twice more at targets I could barely see through the debris and smoke. 2 rounds remaining. The enemy was maybe 20 meters from our position now. Close enough that I could see individual faces, equipment details, the tactical hand signals their leaders used to coordinate assault. I fired my last 2 rounds. Both hit 1 kill, 1 probable wound. Click. Empty. I was dry. The entire squad was dry. 7 guardsmen armed with nothing but combat knives, facing 50 enemy soldiers with full ammunition and proper equipment. Close defense. I ordered, drawing my knife, moving to the choke point where the barricade forced enemy forces to enter in limited numbers. Make them pay for every meter. The enemy reached the barricade. Started climbing over, pushing through, exploiting gaps we couldn't properly seal. Jorik met the first one with his knife, the blade finding throat, the soldier dropping. But 2 more were coming behind, and Jorik couldn't stop them both, and one of them shot him single round, center mass, dropping him instantly. Chen engaged the second soldier hand to hand, his knife against their blade, grappling in close quarters where shooting risked hitting friendly forces. He killed his opponent but took wounds that bled too freely, that would kill him if we survived long enough for blood loss to matter. Harlan used his empty lasgun as club, smashing it into enemy soldier's face with enough force to crack both the weapon and the skull. The lasgun shattered expensive Imperial equipment destroyed for single kill, but the kill bought us seconds, forced the enemy to slow their assault slightly. I was fighting at the primary entry point, my knife against their blades and bayonets and improvised weapons. I killed one, wounded another, took a cut across my ribs that burned like chemical fire, killed a third, felt a bayonet slice across my shoulder, cutting muscle, reducing my left arm's functionality. We were losing. Obviously, comprehensively, inevitably losing. But we were making it expensive. Every enemy soldier who entered had to fight through our knives. Every meter they advanced cost them casualties. Every second they spent overrunning our position was a second they couldn't spend advancing elsewhere. It was all we had. All we could offer. Our bodies as obstacles, our deaths as inconvenience, our final resistance as minor tactical complication in enemy's larger operation. Masika went down, shot while fighting with her knife. Torvald fell moments later, overwhelmed by 3 soldiers simultaneously. Beck killed 2 before taking multiple wounds that left him crumpled against the depot wall. Chen, Harlan, and I remained. 3 guardsmen against maybe 30 enemy soldiers still functional after our resistance. The mathematics had never favored us, but now they were absolutely impossible. I was bleeding from multiple wounds. Harlan was moving slowly, probably injured internally. Chen was barely standing, leaning against debris for support. The enemy was regrouping, preparing final push that would eliminate the last resistance. This was how we died. Not heroically. Not achieving anything strategically significant. Just stubbornly, expensively, forcing them to work for victory that was never in doubt. And then the Vox, Masika's Vox, lying near her body, crackled to life with transmission that changed everything. All Imperial forces. This is Commander Voss. Mechanized relief column en route to contested sectors. Heavy armor support available for isolated units. Any survivors, mark positions for extraction. Repeat, mark positions for extraction. Relief, armor, extraction. Hope arriving too late to save most of my squad, but possibly in time to save the survivors. I couldn't respond. The Vox was receive only, damaged beyond repair. Couldn't mark our position through proper channels. Couldn't signal that we were here, alive, desperate for support. But I had other options. Harlan, Chen, the smoke grenades, deploy them outside. We'd been issued smoke for concealment during withdrawal, standard guard equipment for breaking contact. We'd never used them because we'd never withdrawn. They remained on our webbing. Forgotten until this moment. Harlan and Chen deployed their smoke grenades through the barricade gaps, the canisters producing thick-colored smoke that billowed upward, purple smoke, the standard Imperial distress marker visible from extended distance. The enemy saw the smoke, recognized it as distress signal, understood we were calling for support. They pressed their assault, trying to eliminate us before relief arrived. But they'd already committed too much time, too many casualties, too many resources to overrunning our position. Had slowed their advance to deal with our resistance. Had created exactly the delay that gave relief column time to respond. I heard them before I saw them, the distinctive sound of Imperial armor moving at combat speed. Chimera APCs, by the sound, maybe accompanied by heavier vehicles, responding to our distress marker with the kind of firepower we'd lacked throughout this entire engagement. The enemy heard them too. Broke off the assault, withdrew rapidly, recognizing that staying meant facing armor they couldn't counter with light infantry equipment. The Chimeras arrived maybe 2 minutes later, 3 vehicles, guns traversing, seeking targets that were already retreating. The lead vehicle's commander stood in the hatch, surveying the depot. "Imperial Guard survivors?" he called out. "Corporal Valdis, 3rd Squad," I responded, my voice hoarse from smoke and shouting. 3 effectives, 4 wounded, requesting immediate Medicae support. The Chimeras deployed their infantry fresh guards with full ammunition, proper equipment, the confidence of soldiers who hadn't been fighting on empty for hours. Medicae personnel rushed to treat our wounded, while combat troops established perimeter security. I collapsed against the depot wall, my adrenaline exhausted, my wounds demanding attention I'd been suppressing through combat necessity. A Medicae was asking me questions: where I was hurt, how long we'd been engaged, what our status was. I answered mechanically, distantly, my mind still processing what had happened. We'd run out of ammunition. Had fought hand-to-hand against overwhelming odds. Had lost 4 of 7 squad members. Had held position until relief arrived through combination of stubborn resistance and improbable timing. We'd survived, 3 of us, Harlan, Chen, and myself, bleeding, injured, traumatized, but alive. 4 hadn't. Jorik, Masika, Torvald, Beck, their bodies being recovered by the Chimera crews, wrapped in standard guard burial shrouds, prepared for whatever funeral rites the regiment could provide. The Chimera commander approached while Medicae worked on my wounds. "Corporal, what were you doing here? This sector was evacuated hours ago. You should have withdrawn with everyone else." "Never received the order, sir," I explained. "Vox was damaged. Couldn't transmit, only receive intermittently. We held position according to last valid orders." He looked at the depot at the barricaded entrance, the enemy bodies scattered around our position, the defensive setup we'd maintained. "How long were you out of ammunition?" "Approximately 3 hours, sir. We conserved what we had." made them think we were still combat effective as long as possible. His expression shifted recognition of what we'd done, what it had cost, what it had achieved. You held this position for 3 hours without ammunition. Against how many? Estimate 50 to 100 enemy soldiers, sir. They probed multiple times before committing to assault. We fired only when absolutely necessary to maintain illusion of combat effectiveness. He nodded slowly. Your resistance delayed their advance through this sector. Forced them to commit forces to assaulting a position they thought was strongly held. Created gap in their line that our relief column exploited. You didn't just survive, Corporal. You achieved tactical objective through sheer stubborn resistance. I thought about Jorik and his empty lasgun. About Massacre listening to withdrawal orders we couldn't acknowledge. About Torvald asking about surrender. About all of us fighting with knives when ammunition ran out because fighting was all we knew how to do. We did our duty, sir, I said. Held position until relieved. That's what Guard does. That's exactly what Guard does, he agreed. They evacuated us in the Chimeras, the 3 survivors loaded into one vehicle, our dead in another. The depot abandoned as the relief column continued its advance. I watched through the vision blocks as we pulled away, seeing the position we'd held for so long receding into distance. We'd run out of ammunition and fought anyway. Had faced impossible odds and held anyway. Had lost more than half our squad and survived anyway. Not through heroism or exceptional skill, just through stubborn refusal to stop fighting even when fighting became practically impossible. Through disciplined conservation of resources, through willingness to use knives when guns ran dry. Through pure, grinding resistance that bought time for relief that might not have come. The Medicae sedated me once we were clear of the combat zone. The last thing I remember from that day was the rhythmic movement of the Chimera, the sound of its engine, the feeling of being transported away from the depot we'd defended with everything we had and then beyond. I woke in a field Medicae station, my wounds treated, my squad survivors in nearby beds. Harlan had internal injuries that would require extended recovery. Chen had lost significant blood but would survive. I had multiple lacerations, muscle damage, possible infection requiring antibiotics we didn't have sufficient supply of. We'd all live. Probably. Assuming infection didn't set in, wounds didn't reopen, and we received proper medical care. The regimental commander visited 3 days later, commended our action, noted that our resistance had achieved tactical objectives beyond our immediate survival, mentioned that we'd be recognized for holding position under extreme circumstances. I didn't care about recognition, didn't want commendation for doing what doctrine required. Just wanted to understand why 4 of my squad had died holding a meaningless depot in a lost sector during a battle that achieved nothing strategic. The commander must have read my expression. Your action mattered, Corporal, he said quietly. You think you were holding empty depot, but you were holding enemy attention, enemy resources, enemy time. You were creating friction in their advance. That friction allowed our relief column to exploit gaps, recover positions, extract personnel who would have been lost otherwise. Your squad's resistance saved lives beyond your own. Maybe that was true. Maybe our stubborn defense had ripple effects we couldn't perceive from our isolated position. Maybe dying in that depot achieved something beyond immediate tactical situation. Or maybe the commander was offering comfort, giving meaning to deaths that were ultimately just casualties of larger military operation, soldiers who happened to be in wrong place when ammunition ran out and withdrawal became impossible. I'll never know which interpretation is accurate. What I know is this. We ran out of ammunition and fought with knives. Held position when position should have been abandoned. Died, some of us, because we followed doctrine, and doctrine got us killed. And somehow, through improbable timing and stubborn resistance, 3 of us survived. The clicking sound still haunts me. That empty mechanical snap of Jorik's lasgun when his power pack finally depleted. The sound that marked transition from combat effective to desperate, from armed resistance to improvised violence, from soldiers to survivors. I hear it sometimes in quiet moments. Click. The sound of ammunition running out. The sound of doctrine becoming inadequate. The sound of having to fight with whatever remains when proper weapons fail. We ran out of ammunition, and we fought anyway, because that's what Guard does. We fight until we can't fight anymore, and then we fight with knives. And sometimes, not always, not even often, but sometimes, we survive.